So I think it all started on one of those scorchingly hot summer afternoons. You know, the kind where the sun is just relentless and everyone's basically melting into their couches. I was sprawled out in my room, fan blasting, trying to avoid the dreaded weekend chore list like it was some sort of ancient curse. My younger brother, Mark. Yeah, that Mark walks in with this cheeky grin, and before I even realize what's happening, he throws this wild idea at me. Hey, what if you took over my chores for a week and I'll do yours, he says, like it's the best deal ever. Honestly, my first thought was, fine, whatever, that sounds like a break. I mean, how hard could it be? Mark's tasks barely seemed like work. Empty the trash, feed the dog, that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, mine included vacuuming, doing dishes, and, cleaning my room, which was like a battle zone itself. So I thought, why not? It'd be a breeze, a little summer swap, and I wouldn't have to think about my own chores for a whole week. Except, things never work out the way you imagine them, right? That same day, I mentioned the plan loud enough for my parents to catch wind of it. They didn't explode or anything. In fact, they kind of smirked like this was some sort of teachable moment. My mom said, "You know, it might be a good experience for both of you to walk a mile in each other's shoes." I rolled my eyes at her, but deep down I wasn't entirely convinced. I mean, how different could Mark's chores really be from mine? Plus, I kinda liked the idea of him figuring out just how easy his stuff actually was. So, the swap was officially on. Mark got my chore list, and I got his. That tiny decision? It was like setting off a chain reaction I didn't see coming. At first, I tried to keep it chill, thinking, I'll just hop over Mark's stuff when I feel like it, no big deal. But then, day one hit me like a brick wall. I came home from grabbing ice cream with Jess, my best friend who already thought this whole plan was a disaster waiting to happen, and walked into my room to find it, let's just say, creatively rearranged. Clothes on the floor were, somehow, mixed with Mark's old baseball gloves, and my textbooks were stacked in an awkward, teetering tower. Mark shrugged. I did my best, I swear. Meanwhile, tackling his chores turned out to be a stealthy kind of torture. Feeding the dog might sound simple, but Mark's food portions? Way more complicated than I realized. Plus, trash bins hidden behind bushes and recycling rules that might as well have been in another language. Oh, and that's not even the half of it. Jess kept texting me, confused about when I was free for our planned movie marathon, because apparently Mark's schedule clashed with ours, and I was stuck trying to juggle both. I was starting to realize that swapping responsibilities wasn't just about chores. It was like stepping into a whole other world with its own set of unspoken rules and annoyances. And then, just when I thought I was getting the hang of it, Mark started using my stuff without asking. My headphones disappeared for hours, and my favorite hoodie was mysteriously worn around the house like some sort of security blanket. I won't lie, frustration was bubbling up. Here I was, trying to tackle his mess, and he was just wandering around in my things like they were his own. That's when my parents pulled me aside, their faces looking kind of serious, but also a bit amused. "Looks like this chore swap of yours might come with some surprises," my dad said with that half smile that meant, "We told you so, but we're going to enjoy watching this play out." At that moment, I had no idea what exactly they meant, but I knew this week was going to be way more complicated than a simple task exchange. And honestly, I didn't know if I was ready for what was coming next. Mark, my kid brother, is the kind of guy who somehow makes dodging chores look like an Olympic sport. He's mastered the art of disappearing right when the vacuum's supposed to come out or magically forgetting that the trash needs to go out. Honestly, I didn't always blame him for avoiding chores. I mean, who really wants to sort recycling or scrub the bathroom when you could be doing literally anything else? But the way he sidestepped responsibilities made me roll my eyes harder than I'd like to admit. So, when our parents overheard me whining about the swap plan and the mountain of tasks suddenly looming over me, I didn't expect their reaction. They didn't just nod and tell me to deal with it. Instead, my mom gave this subtle smile, the kind that suggests she knows something you don't. Dad chimed in, "Maybe it's good for both of you. A little perspective never hurts." Perspective? That sounded like polite translation for, "We're about to watch you both crash and burn." Still, there was no turning back now. I mean, I'd agreed, and Mark was already smirking like he'd just won the lottery. The stakes quickly became clear. Mark's tasks were usually quick: feed the dog, take out the trash, water the plants. Easy enough, right? Except now they were my tasks. And his idea of watering the plants was apparently more like spray water aimlessly and hope for the best, which, spoiler alert, did not keep the poor fern alive. Meanwhile, Mark had my chores, and that turned into an entirely different beast. My usual routine was studiously organized, with specific times for each activity. With Mark handling it, things got, well, chaotic. It was like suddenly walking into someone else's schedule who thinks doing the dishes whenever you remember is the same as doing them on time. Spoiler alert, it's not. Jess, who had been skeptical about this whole swap from the jump, kept texting me with increasingly confused messages. "So, when exactly are you free this weekend?" she asked after I'd given her a tentative time for our movie marathon. Turns out, Mark's free time was all over the place, and since my schedule was now his, coordinating plans felt like untangling a knot that kept getting tighter. By midweek, that realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Not only was my day-to-day routine turned upside down, but my social life was starting to suffer. And as if that wasn't enough, Mark, who'd seemed surprisingly okay with the whole swap during day one, started exploiting his new freedom a bit too much. I caught him twice sneaking into my room to use my laptop without asking. Once, my headphones vanished for hours, only to be found tangled in his bag later on. And my favorite hoodie? Well, let's just say it became his go-to comfort item whenever he'd flop onto the couch. When I confronted him, he just shrugged with that trademark grin. "It's not like you're using it right now or anything." That shrug was like throwing salt on an already fresh wound, and, yeah, I was feeling pretty powerless about the whole thing. It wasn't just the chores anymore, it was my space being invaded without so much as a buy your leave. And here I was trying to keep his mess in check on top of managing the fallout. Then, the night that seemed like it'd be just another episode of How to Lose Your Mind Over Household Tasks took a strange turn. My parents called me into the living room after dinner, the kind of serious but kind of amused look plastered on their faces that immediately made me suspicious. Dad started with a slow nod and said, "You know, this swap thing might have some unexpected consequences." Mom was nodding, but she kind of smiled like she found the whole situation hilarious, or maybe she was just amused at my predicament. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to sound casual but feeling the pit of unease growing in my stomach. "Well," Mom began, "it might not just be about chores and mess. Sometimes walking a mile in someone else's shoes means you see things differently. You might find out some stuff that's been under the surface." Dad added, "And not all of it is what you expect." There it was. The hint of something bigger, lurking just beneath the banality of chores and schedules. They didn't give me any more details, but just those words spun my head into overdrive. Was this going to be some crazy sibling showdown where secrets got spilled or long-held grudges came boiling up? Or would it be something more unexpected? Either way, I realized this chore swap was fast becoming way more than a simple trade-off. Whatever surprises lay ahead, I was right smack in the middle of them. So, day one was a disaster, but nothing prepared me for how this week was going to spiral farther out of control. I mean, Mark's attempt at tidying my room was like a tornado had passed through. Clothes weren't just on the floor, they were sort of artistically tossed about, mixed with his baseball gloves and even one of those weird stress balls he got at summer camp last year. My carefully stacked textbooks were toppled over into a leaning tower that looked like it was seconds from collapse. "Seriously?" I said, raising an eyebrow when I walked in after an ice cream run with Jess. Mark just grinned. "I did my best, I swear. I'm not exactly a neat freak like you, which is kind of the understatement of the century." Meanwhile, I was discovering that Mark's chore list wasn't as simple as I'd thought. Feeding the dog? Easy peasy, right? Except, no. Apparently, the dog's meals have a specific routine and timing, or else she gives you this judgmental look like you personally failed her. Then there was trash duty. The bins were hidden like some kind of secret treasure behind bushes, and the recycling rules were like deciphering an ancient code. I stood there holding a crumpled soda can, muttering, "Is this plastic or glass or—" Jess kept blowing up my phone while all this chaos was unfolding. She sent a message saying, "Wait, so you're free when exactly for our movie marathon?" I laughed, thumbs hovering over my phone because my schedule was now this weird combination of Mark's and mine, none of which actually aligned with my social plans. By midweek, things went from frustrating to full-on tense. Mark's casual attitude toward my stuff suddenly grated on me in ways I wasn't expecting. He started borrowing my headphones and disappearing with them for hours. My hoodie, yeah, the one I practically live in when I'm lounging, was suddenly Mark's new favorite comfort item. "You can't just take my things without asking." I snapped one afternoon after I caught him chilling on the couch, hoodie in full effect. He gave me this shrug and a knowing smirk. "It's not like you're using it, so chill." Ugh, that shrug. It was like a challenge and a dismissal rolled into one. Meanwhile, I was still trying to keep up with his chores, some of which turned out to be way trickier or way grosser than I'd ever imagined. And that recycling bin? Let's just say the entire neighborhood might have smelled the oops when I accidentally put the compost in the trash. What made it worse was this weird feeling of powerlessness creeping in. Like I was trying to control this chaos, but the more I tried, the messier everything became. Mark apparently had no trouble navigating my room like it was his personal play zone, but I was struggling to get a handle on just his half of the responsibilities. So, when my parents called me into the living room one night after what felt like a lifetime of juggling schedules and muttered frustrations, I felt this weird mix of dread and curiosity. Mom smiled at me, the kind of smile that hides a prank in the wings. Dad leaned back in his chair, looking like he was about to drop the kind of wisdom that makes you squirm. You know, this chore swap might come with some surprises, Dad said, voice calm but with an edge of amusement. I blinked, unsure if this was a joke or a warning. Mom nodded. Sometimes when you step into someone else's world, you notice things you hadn't before. Maybe things that have been sitting there, quietly. I swallowed hard. What kind of things? Dad gave that slow, knowing nod again. Not just chores, not just mess. Sometimes, when you walk a mile in someone else's shoes, you find out a bit more about them and maybe about yourself. It was like suddenly this silly chore swap was tipping into something bigger than just dirty dishes and misplaced headphones. I glanced at Mark's door down the hall, wondering what kind of surprises awaited there. And honestly, I wasn't sure if I was ready to find out. The next morning started off like any other, except that whisper of unexpected consequences from my parents was hanging in the air, making every little chore feel like a lead weight. As I shuffled into the kitchen to tackle Mark's watering duty, I caught a glimpse of him sitting at the breakfast table, quietly scribbling in his notebook. That was new. Usually, he'd be off dodging responsibility, not embracing it. "Morning," I said cautiously, trying not to sound like I was sizing him up. He looked up, a bit sheepish. "Hey." I've been thinking." "Oh? About what? How to keep destroying my room or how to borrow my stuff without asking?" I teased, half joking, half serious. Mark smiled, shaking his head. "No, actually. I noticed you get swamped with stuff more than I thought. And I kinda get why you get so frustrated." I blinked, caught off guard by the honesty. "Yeah," he continued. "When I tried your chores, I realized it's not just about the tasks. It's about all the little things wrapped up in them, like having your own system and feeling like only you can keep it right. I didn't get that before. I felt this flicker of warmth shoot through me. Maybe the swap was working in ways I hadn't imagined." Later that day, while I was cleaning up the kitchen, carefully separating the recycling this time, I noticed Mark tending to the garden with an unexpected care. He'd managed not to drown the plants, which in itself was a minor miracle. "Hey," I called out, "did you read the label on the plant food or just wing it?" He chuckled and held up the tiny instruction sheet. "I'm a quick learner, remember?" We shared a laugh, the kind that feels like the ice is finally breaking. But the most surprising moment came that evening. Mark and I were sprawled on the living room floor, heads buried in our phones when he nudged me. "Look," he said, "I know I've been kind of a pain this week raiding your hoodie stash, disappearing with your headphones and all that." "Sorry." I smirked, pretending to be unaffected, but honestly, it felt nice hearing him say it. "No worries," I said. "I guess I've been a pain too, bossing you around with the chores and snapping at you." We exchanged that awkward but genuine sibling grin, the kind that didn't need words. And then, just when I thought the night was winding down, Mark surprised me again. "How about next week?" he proposed. "We split the chores? You do yours, I do mine, but we help each other out when things get crazy." I looked at him, imagining the chaos of a perfectly shared responsibility, and honestly, that sounded way better. Because by now, thanks to that week of swapping, I'd learned the hard way how much work really goes into even the small, everyday stuff. "Deal," I said, holding out my hand. As our palms met, I realized this little experiment wasn't just about chores or schedules. It was about seeing each other in a new light. About learning that even when someone seems like a pain or a slacker, they're probably balancing things you don't see. Later that night, as I slipped into my room, now mostly tidy thanks to Mark's surprisingly decent attempt, I felt this quiet gratitude. The week had been messy, literally, frustrating, and totally chaotic, but also kind of beautiful in a way I hadn't expected. So, I guess this whole chore swap thing? It ended up being less about who does what and more about us figuring out how we fit together and maybe, just maybe, how sometimes you have to give a little ground to find something better. What about you? If you had to swap responsibilities with someone for a week, could you survive the surprises that come along with it?